We're ready when you are, Blake.
All righty. Good afternoon, everybody. I'd like to call to order the Watertown Board of Adjustment meeting for February 4th, 2021. Can I get a roll call, please?
Sure. Ford,
Ford is here, and I don't see you on TV on Channel 2.
oh. We'll let our IT department know.
Is the stream going on YouTube as well?
Yes, it looks like it's up and going on Facebook and YouTube.
Shucks. Shucks.
Just as we were live.
We're working on it here for just a minute.
Yep,
Okay.
We'll wait a minute.
Okay, I guess we're ready to move forward, but thank you, Ford.
Okay.
Dargis Johnson. She is going to be absent, I believe. Oletsky,
Present.
Kays,
Here.
Brink is going to be absent. Hanson, absent. Spire, Spire,
Bill, I see you online, but you're muted.
Okay, we'll come back to Spire. Colhane. And I believe Colhane will be joining us maybe in about half hour or so. So for the time being, we'll mark him as absent. And Dolly.
Here.
Okay. Spire. Okay. This thing? Okay.
I believe we need Bill to chime in to have quorum, right? Yep.
He said he is, yes.
Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Hi. We'll put you down as present for the roll call. Thank you. Okay.
All righty. Moving on from the roll call to the approval of the minutes. Need an approval or a motion for approval of the minutes from the January 7th, 2021 meeting.
I'll make that motion to approve the minutes.
We have a motion. Do I have a second?
Ford seconds.
Any discussion on those? Any changes required? Okay, we'll go ahead and take a vote on that.
Ford,
Yes.
Oletsky,
Yes.
Kays,
Sorry, yes.
Spire, uh-oh.
If we just have him call in,
Okay.
you could have him call in on this number.
Okay.
Does anyone have him text? We just have him call in on the conference phone. Wait, at least we can, I don't know if you can see on Teams or not.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. We'll skip Spire for right now. Dolly?
Yes.
Okay. and we'll wait for a moment for Spire.
This is Bill Spire. Can you hear me?
Hi,
Yep,
Bill.
we can hear you.
Yes, we can hear you.
Hello.
Can you hear us?
So I could dial into the conference through the phone, but I can't do anything through the Teams.
Okay.
So I'm here though.
Okay. So, we were actually calling roll for the minutes of January 7th.
Just need your
So I
vote,
didn't-
Bill, yay or nay on the approval of the minutes.
I'll go with a yay.
Okay, thank you, Bill. Those minutes are approved. Moving on to the approval of the agenda. Do I have a motion for the approval of the agenda?
I'll make that
Ford
motion.
moves.
And I'll second.
Motion by Ford and a second by Oletsky. Any discussion on the agenda before we take a vote? Okay, we'll take a vote on the agenda.
Okay. Spire,
Yay.
Kays, Kays,
Yes.
thank you. Oletsky,
Yes.
Ford,
Yes.
and Dolly.
Yes. All right then, moving into the regular agenda. Item 5A on the agenda is a variance request for property located at 516 North Lake Drive. Stacy, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this particular request is for a variance in the side yard setback. The property, as you can see up here, is at 516 North Lake Drive, and I will go over to an exhibit here.
Mr. Chair, would she share her screen with the team?
Sure. Thank you. Sorry, it's taken me just a minute to get this pulled up here. Okay, so here's the property. It is along North Lake Drive, as you can see here. And here is the site plan that is being requested. So an application was submitted to construct a proposed garage in addition to the house here. And one of the corners is at 8 feet from the side property line. The zoning ordinance does require a 9-foot setback in the R1 single-family residential district. The applicant is seeking a variance to help accommodate the parking of larger vehicles within this proposed garage. And the property does have some degree of irregularity due to the shape as the side yards narrow from the lake to the street. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
On that note, Stacy, regarding the narrowing, I see on the street side that this property is 96 foot wide, which is a pretty large width for some of these lake lots where we have historically had some substandard width sizes.
Mhm.
Wait, what is the lake side? It looks almost like the house is actually skewed versus the lot narrowing.
It may be. Let's take a look at that, and I can just try this off of the GIS here. 95.9. So it's pretty close.
And I think this is something that we have seen, in other areas too, where homes, especially older homes, can be, sitting slightly skewed on the property, which then presents a challenge when you're looking at side yards where you're trying to be consistent and, keeping parallel walls while it's not parallel with the property line. But it is a challenge that, people have to deal with in regards to setbacks. Question two on, so the site plan shows this 14-foot for lot 24 on the east side of the property there. Is that part of the neighbor's property or is that some access easement?
I believe the applicant can answer that question, as I understand that may be a relative.
Hi, I'm
Okay.
Leanne.
I'll
Leanne
go ahead and open the
Swenson.
public hearing then.
Okay, I'm Leanne Swenson, the one that's here for the variance. The owners adjacent to us is my brother and sister-in-law, and so they've signed a letter here stating that they are perfectly okay with what we're asking, but there isn't any easement or anything, I guess, that's there. That's just how the property line goes, and we share pretty much everything out there.
Leanne,
Yes?
this is Bonnie talking. Your brother and sister-in-law, they still have their own access to their property also, right? It
Yeah.
looks like it's a U-shaped drive.
It's a U drive, and
So you're not gonna hurt them.
no, not at all.
Okay, is your new garage going to block that access, or will they still be able to, where
No.
the driveways adjoin?
No, they'll be able to come in their driveway, and what we put out there, it will not block the driveway. It's not
Okay.
going to. So we're coming in. I guess we both come in and out of both of those things, but it's not going to block if they want to leave out ours, because they actually leave out our driveway more because there's a big sign and a hill, and it's kind of hard for traffic.
Oh, okay.
So we most of the time go out our driveway.
And then your existing garage is gonna still be there, correct?
For a while. My husband wants to tear it down because it's got leaky roof and all kinds of stuff
Oh.
going on. But we reside out here like 70% of the time. We are going to be residing out here all the time as we're selling our house where we live out by Goodwin. So that's why we're putting a garage on, is because it's no longer just filled with toys. We'll have to use it for vehicles.
Thank you. Is there any additional questions for the applicant from the board?
This is Ford. I just wonder about actually taking that 30 feet and 18 feet on the northeast side of the proposed garage and house and making it parallel with the lot line and using that 5.5 feet that's cut out, the 5.5 feet by 8, so that you wouldn't have to have this 1 foot variance.
I guess I'm not sure what you're asking, because the garage is going to set forward from the house so that we can have the right length, so it's not the same length as the house. And also for the look of coming in, we didn't want everything, just flat. So we'd be driving in, because we have an entry into the house with a set of steps. So we'd be basically driving into the steps to park our vehicles.
Where are the steps? I'm uncertain. I don't know where those are.
Do you see where the 20, where it says proposed house, that goes along in the proposed garage, the middle dotted line there?
Yes.
Okay, the set of steps runs where it says number 22, because we come up sideways and then we turn and enter into the house. So right where she's got the pointer is the set of steps. So we'll be coming straight in and straight onto the steps.
Is that the reason for this 5.5 feet right
Yes.
here then?
Yes. Because we have to have a set of steps to get into the existing house. It's up, sits up in the air.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes.
Any additional questions from the applicant? I will ask if there's any additional public comments from anybody else as well.
I have one more comment, one more question, Blake.
Yep,
I
Ms.
see
Wood.
I see on the form that was filled out when asked to describe the hardship that the variance was denied, it just says the garage would be too small for larger vehicles. It doesn't, there's nothing on this that describes anything about steps. And it also, right above that, talks about the definition of unnecessary hardship, something that's substantial and of a compelling force, not merely for reasons of convenience. So I'm trying to figure that out. I guess a garage being too small for larger vehicles, I would consider a reason for convenience. But now that the applicant has discussed the steps, I guess I'm trying to figure where the steps that weren't initially discussed on this application, where they come in as far as being an unnecessary hardship.
I guess I don't know how to answer that, but if I don't, how am I supposed to enter the house if I don't have the steps where they're at? I'm not sure. I guess I didn't put that on, but that is part of the hardship of trying to come in and have the steps. We also, I guess I didn't write that on the application either, we're going to have to put some sort of a smaller furnace in this garage to heat the proposed part of the house that sits towards the lakeside. And so we're trying to figure that out actually right now. But if the steps are like 4 foot wide and I can't enter them straight into the house, I have to come up sideways and then turn and go into the house. So I have nowhere to put those steps. So it's kind of a hardship for us to, being we do have 2 larger vehicles and that set of steps to have to work around.
And also, most garages are like that, 28 to 30 feet long. So if you knocked off that 5 feet, it would really hinder the ability to use the garage at the length of most vehicles.
Correct. And if we measured our vehicles because we also want to be able to open the doors and not door ding each other and walk around them instead of having it so small that we can't. You know, if we knocked that off, that's where we run into trouble. The steps are what causes the most problem.
This is Brandy. I think that it's something to consider as well, that they aren't meeting the setbacks other than just that northeast corner, and that is because it kind of, the house is not set parallel to the lot line. And then also, you know, at the lake, we've seen situations like this where if we can come up with more of a consistent setback, and a lot of lake properties are at 6 or less even. But that'll be something that we'll look at when we are creating the lake residential district. But just something to consider.
Is it considered by staff or something that we typically would advise when we have a shared drive like exists on these 2 properties, to have some sort of, you know, access arrangement between the properties in case they do change hands?
I definitely think it would be encouraged.
And the good thing about these 2 properties is that at least they each do have their own accesses. So, and right now it works out well that it is family. But if in the future though, like if they were to ever sell the properties, they probably would want to just establish that, have an access easement at that time that they would sell, just to memorialize that. But at least they each do have their own access. Like one of the lots doesn't have both accesses.
Yep, that makes sense.
Mr. Chair, my recommendation would be to leave that amongst themselves, not having government intrude on that, because that's something that the Gibsons would have to figure out on their own if they want to continue that.
Yeah, certainly I don't think it would be something that needs to be a requirement here, but as far as advising people of arrangements like that might otherwise not be known as it relates to the change of hands of property and what it could impact in the future.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
just to throw something else out there, I do realize that The Gibsons and Swensons are related. There is a 14-foot portion of lot 24 that is owned by the Swensons. I mean, it could be possible that they could ask their neighbors for another foot and not need the variance as well. That's a possibility too, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, we've discussed that, but when we talked to Marty Mack, the guy that did the surveying, he said that's an awful lot of work to go through for just 1 foot. And so he said I would go for the variance because it seems to make more sense for everybody, because otherwise you're replotting and relotting and doing all kinds of different things. So we choose to come this option.
Thank you, Leanne.
Yep.
Yep, thank you.
Mr. Chair, this is Bill.
Yes, Paul?
So I wanted to follow on with the question, my question from earlier, and I understand the need for 5.5 feet for the establishment of an entryway with the new structure there. And what's preventing the entryway from being established from the existing household, and then not having the property extend over the property line or the required distance?
The entryway to the house is in the middle of the house, so I can't really move it anywhere because I have bedrooms on the, I'm going to call it the north end, not on the road side. And on the other end is a kitchen area, so I don't really have any place to put another door to get in.
So design-wise, it's just the way that the proposed addition's been built in conjunction with the existing structure. Just that's what's been designed is a single option for this proposal.
Yeah, we have entry on the lake side, but for somebody that's coming and pulling up, we won't be able to even see that somebody's even come, or have them walk all the way around the house, or for us per se to travel all the way around the house. You know, they would come in, most of the time they come in through the house and out the patio door.
And I guess I would say my only concern about, let's assume a variance is approved, establishes an encroachment into adjacent property and forecasting the future transfer of the property to non-relative owners, or even relatives, if you don't get along down the road somewhere, whatever the case may be, creates a situation where you're going to have an encroachment that's going to affect, second order, third order effects with going through financing with mortgage lenders and continued variance requirements.
Bill,
It was mainly a comment. It wasn't necessarily a question. It's just sort of establishing a permanent encroachment that we haven't resolved, wouldn't necessarily have resolved just by approving a variance.
Bill, this is Brandy. Just to be clear on, so they're not encroaching on the neighboring property, they're encroaching in the side yard setback?
Okay.
Yeah, it
That's
would,
good. Thank you, Brandy. That helps.
Yep.
yeah, it'd be,
Okay, thank you.
just a driveway at some point in time, maybe, would need to be looked at, if the properties were to sell, either in establishing a formal access easement or, eliminating, this portion.
Okay, understood. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And so that northeast corner of the garage would still be 8 foot off of the property line?
All right, I do have the public hearing open. Is there anybody else to speak on behalf or against this while we have the public hearing open?
Did the neighbors have anything to say?
Everybody seemed fine with it, and like I said, I have a letter from my brother and his wife, who couldn't be here today because they're working, stating that they were perfectly okay with doing this.
I actually did hear from one of the neighbors, is the owner of 524 North Lake Drive, and he has no objection.
Thank you, Stacy.
You're welcome.
And thank you, Ms. Swenson.
Thank you.
I'll go ahead and close the public hearing then. We'll look to the board for further discussion. Motion.
I'll make the motion to approve.
A motion by
Bill,
Bonnie
second.
and a second by Bill. Additional discussion on this?
Well, what I see is that it's going to be 8 foot away from the lot line, and the overhang is generally what, 2.5, 3 feet, 4 feet. So even with the overhang and rain gutters, it won't be dumping water onto the neighbor's property. You know, you'll direct the water away and stuff, so I don't see a problem with it.
All right. With that, we'll go ahead and take a roll call vote on this.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Spire,
Yes.
Kays,
Yes.
Aletsky,
Yes.
Ford,
Yes.
Dolly.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you, Stacy.
You're welcome.
All right, moving on to
Thank
item
you for your
6B on
time.
the agenda.
You're welcome.
What was that?
I just want to say thank you for your time.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, I'm going to switch seats with Brandy, and we'll be back in action in just a moment.
All right, sounds good.
Thank you.
All right, just 1 second here.
No worries.
Okay. And Blake, did you already go ahead and introduce the item?
I can. So item 6B on the regular agenda is resolution 2021-03.
All right.
Let's see. We've already had this in front of us in relation to the Plan Commission actions, right, for the annexation and zoning. We've looked at this one time previously and pushed it to this particular agenda today. So I'll let
Correct.
Brandy, you can go through the rest of it.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you, Blake. And thanks for providing some of that history. As just to elaborate further on that, the annexation zoning was passed by the Plan Commission at the January 7th meeting, which then went on to council for a first reading and then the second reading. And so that was actually approved this past Monday on February 1st at the city council meeting. And that was to annex and zone this South 40 portion of Watertown Crop Nutrients property here, which is actually what has brought us here today. And then in looking at the fact that that 40 acres, the South 40 acres, and I'll highlight that area there, and then let me turn on the zoning. So then you can see the rest of the property was annexed and zoned in 2011. So now after the 20-day referral period for the annexation and zoning, this the South 40 acres will also be annexed and zoned as I-2 heavy industrial, same as the northern portion of the property. So another thing, as far as what we're acting on today, are 3 conditional uses. And I'll read those here. It'll be for the train loading and unloading, fertilizer manufacturing, and salvage storage of wind turbine blades, which that third one, the salvage storage, is actually what was brought to our attention And then just looking at the property and looking at the history, we realized that we were going to bring forward the other two, the train loading and unloading and the fertilizer manufacturing, just because they are conditional uses in the ordinance, and just to memorialize it on the entirety of the property all at once here. But we will act on them separately, and so you'll be able to consider if there's any conditions. The salvage storage and wind turbine blades is the newest use that the property owners would like to utilize, and that they will be storing wind turbine blades for salvage in this general vicinity here. And I have a map of that on the agenda to kind of show you guys a better idea of where some of these uses are taking place. And so, let me get there. Yeah. So here then you can see there are some drying bins. The extent of the property is outlined in black. That's including that south 40 acres. And then the CHS wet plant, Ag Works, CHS dry plant. And I apologize actually if I did get any of these incorrect. I was going from the information that they provided. And then, but this is the area where the wind turbine blades will be stored. And then they plan on working with another company who is renting this space from them to bring in the blades and then use the train to bring them out. So there's a lot of uses going on with this property. Another thing to consider, and that I foresee the board will be hearing from, will be the adjacent properties. These are residential properties within the county, adjacent to the I-2 zoning designation of the rail spur. And the rail spur has been, it was installed in 2011, I believe, as well, along with that annexation and zoning when all of that took place. So with that, I think I will, I'll open it up to the board if we have discussion. Otherwise, Blake, whenever you want to open the public hearing.
Yeah, and I apologize. I grabbed the wrong agenda and made mention of item B from the Planning Commission, but Brandy, you spoke to the correct one, so thank you. Question for you in relation to the meeting that staff hosted with the neighborhood that took place on January 22nd. Is that correct?
Yep, correct. Yep.
And it mentions here that that a spokesperson for the neighborhood will summarize the discussions from that public meeting or from that neighborhood meeting.
Yep, I think.
Is there a spokesperson there in the room? I'm sorry, I can't see from the team's side, so.
Oh, here, I'll actually. I believe there are neighbors here. I can actually turn on the webcam here, so maybe you can see behind me. So it's going to be real close to me.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Heath Von Eye here. Just as a point of clarity for the sake of the meeting and the structure of it, I'd leave it up to you, of course, but would you prefer to discuss this holistically with all three of these conditional uses being discussed at one time, or proceed individually with each conditional use as presented on the agenda?
I think in situations like this, historically, we've treated it collectively from a public discussion standpoint, even though we may at times take them as separate actions from a plan commission or Board of Adjustment action standpoint. So we'll do that today as well with the public hearing. As we probably have a few people that want to speak today, I would ask that we limit our comments to about 5 minutes a piece and give everybody a chance to speak. If you do have some comments you'd like to make, if we could just build upon what's previously been said. So if you got something new to add to the discussion. With that, I'll go ahead and open the public hearing so we can take those for and against. If we want to start with the proponents of this, and then we can move into any opponent comments.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, on the heels of that, if I could make one last comment, just for the public's clarity, there will be 3 separate action items here by the board this evening, one for each of the 3 conditional uses that are being applied for. First one that'll be entertained will be the train loading and unloading. Second one being fertilizer manufacturing. And then the third one being salvage storage of wind turbine blades. And those conditional uses will be considered for the entirety of this property, not just the recently annexed 40 acres, but the 40 acres also what I would call the parent property to the north, as Brandy has outlined in the black outline on the screen there. So I just wanted to make those 2 points of clarity, 3 separate action items, and they will apply to, if passed, apply to the property in its entirety.
Yeah, that's a good point. And if there are comments to be made that are consistent with one versus another, please make sure to make note of that as you speak to it.
Sounds good. So did you open the public hearing?
I did. So public hearing is open. If we could start with the proponents, or is the applicant here to speak on behalf, and then we can move into any additional comments.
Yep.
Good afternoon, I'm Terry Nelson, I'm the manager.
Good afternoon, I'm Terry Nelson, I'm the manager of the Watertown Crop Nutrients Plant. So back in 2010 and to the start of 2011, we as Watertown Co-op Association and CHS started into looking at building a fertilizer plant. We had looked at 3 sites, one site up by the Waverly exit off the interstate, one site over by Grover, and the site that we're on today. Back in January 31st of 11, about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, we met with the mayor, attorney Stanton Fox, engineer Thomas Drake, the utilities, Focus Watertown, Craig Atkins, about constructing this facility. And we actually had more than just one meeting with them in the next couple of months. That spring, we had a meeting with the adjacent landowners out at the Ramkota. It was Chuck Sweetie and myself that were there. We discussed what was going on with the facility, what we were doing, and they had asked, the one neighbor to the northwest had asked for a fence instead of trees, so we put up a fence. The ones to the southeast of us, they asked for 3 rows of trees, so we put 3 rows of trees on the west sides of their property and on the north side of their property. Okay. We did soil boring in the spring of 11 before we planted the crop on it to find out what we could do. The soil borers came back that we could not put the building on the north side of this facility. We had to switch it to the east side of the facility. Okay, so we met several times with the city, with the mayor and Tom Drake and other ones, trying to put this proposal together. We kind of leaned on them on what we had to do as far as building this facility, what permitting and everything else that we needed to do. We actually got that accomplished. We got a building permit. It would have been September 16th of 2000. Let's see, be 2011. And that's when we told them what we were going to do. Nothing that I know of, that I was part of, nothing ever said that we had to go in front of a board of adjustments. They never made us do it. In good faith, we did what the mayor and them asked us to do. And that's where we're at today. Questions on that part of it? We'll talk about that, and then I'll talk about the wind blades.
Okay, when you met with them at first with the homeowners, was that based on the original that was brought into the city of Watertown, not that south 40 acres?
No, that 40 acres was,
That was already part of it when you met with all of them at the
Yes,
Ramkota?
yep,
Oh,
yep.
okay. Okay,
Yes, it
so
was.
everybody knew it had to move south.
Yes, Yep.
Okay.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Mr. Case.
for Bonnie's sake, just again, Case here. My understanding is at the time, it was understood that the entire parcel was going to be annexed into the city. And if we remember last month, we were talking for some odd reason that south part was not. So because we knew that there was going to be a rail spur built, that we couldn't just stop the rail spur without making the circle complete to the south. I do remember those conversations.
Yeah, and the other point too, and it came up during the plan commission regarding the annexation and the zoning, is that it is consistent with the land use plan that we have documented for the region, that it matches that designation for the whole parcel as well. Question for you related to the use at that time. So we're talking about 3 conditional uses here in front of the board today. First being train loading and unloading, the second being fertilizer manufacturing. Both of those uses were part of the original scope of this property, is that correct?
Correct.
The third one that we're talking about today, the salvage storage of the wind turbine blades, that is a more recent development on this property?
Yes. And I can talk about that whenever we want to, so.
Any additional questions from the board on what's been said so far?
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Mr. Case.
For the applicant, with CHS wet plant and the dry plant, I mean, are you looking at any more future expansion of the fertilizer plant facilities in of itself in the near future?
Not what we did when we built this plant. We used to have 2 plants that were in town. And what happened was we landlocked ourselves to where we can never grow anymore. So they outlived their use. The amount of stuff that we were moving through, we could not do it no more. So when we did this one on the south side of our building today, the dirt work is already done to go out another, we could actually go out to 180 feet if we wanted to the south. The dirt work underneath is already done. All we got to do is take off the top little bit of gravel and add storage. And then also on the east side, in one of the bays, we've got it to where we could construct another tower. Today, we are saying no. Right now, we do not have no future of doing that. It might be later on. We'll just have to wait and see.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think we can go ahead and proceed.
Go to the wind then, or? Okay. So then our last project on the wind blades, back in August of 19, I started calling City Hall because we had interest in wind turbine blades coming in and being offloaded and sent out. I called in probably 3 times a week in the month of August, September, and October to the mayor, asking for a recall, a call back, so that I could visit with her or the city on what we needed to do to get this project off the ground. I never got one call back from anybody. Finally, in October, I called in again and I said, if I don't hear back from anybody from City Hall, I'm stating that this project can move forward. I still did not get nobody to call back. So I waited. It was about a month later. We had already signed the contract with this company, Martin Bender. Somebody from the city had called me on it and asked if we were going to go through with the project. And I said, yes, we had signed a contract. He said, we have concerns with them going through the roundabout. And I said, that was one of the discussions that we had with this company so that we would not block off the traffic. And they did not have a concern. Well, at that time, that project fell through. And then Martin Bender brought this project, that bringing in the salvage blades and then loading them out. Right now, they just loaded their first rail car, and doing a test run to see if this is even gonna work.
So now all of the blades come in on the railroad tracks? They do not use the roundabout? Is that what you're saying?
So what's being done, so what this project is as wind blades, the blades themselves become to where they can't use them no more, they take them off, they cut them into 3 sections. The very tip of it, that's way on the outside, that's shoved into the very part that hooks right up to the motor. And so they bring in them 2 pieces into our lot. They're offloaded by a truck. They bring in by truck and they're gonna go out by rail. So what's going on is these blades are gonna go to Missouri and be ground up. What I was told, I don't know if the guy from Martin is on with us or not. I was told that they're gonna use the ash and the fiber maybe for concrete. I don't know for sure, but that's what it is. They're just disposing of the blades.
But now, at the time that they dismantle the blades, is that when they take away all of the oils and stuff that's in the blades?
There's no, the motor, the generator part is not, it's just the blades. There's no oil or nothing in the blades. All it is just the blade itself. They're cut up, they bring them in, they set them down. They're gonna wait for rail cars, they're gonna pick them back up, they're gonna set them on the rail cars and send them out.
Okay. I'm just asking
Yep,
because,
no problem.
you know, I just don't want to see any runoff going into Lake Pelican or anything like that. If
No,
there's
that-
any oils or
No,
anything
that's
like
our,
that.
no, we have that same concern also. We are very environmental safe on all that stuff, so.
Okay.
Brandy, in the agenda packet, the summary of the responses to the A through H, is this the original responses that we'd seen a month ago, or has this been updated?
Nope, that is the original. Did you have questions on it at all?
Not specifically. I was just looking at the hours of operation, I guess. And it seems the hours of operations that I'm looking at here don't necessarily align to reported hours of operation in practicality, as we discussed at the last meeting.
And I think that may be the other entity on the property, and if they have a spokesperson
What's that now?
for AgWorks.
That'd be Lanny.
Okay.
Okay.
Any more questions from me?
Unless, Brandy, maybe the point of the chairman might have been hours of operation in general for either of the tenants. Is that correct, Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at these hours of operation. It's like 7 to 6, 7 to 5:30. You know, but we had heard reports of hours well beyond those operating hours previously, and so my concern is really just with the discrepancy and where that's at.
So the ones that you see up there right now, the 8 to 4:30, that's our normal business hours in off seasons. Spring and fall, we start at 7 in the spring, 7 a.m., and it varies. We could be done at 5, we could be done at 7, we could be done at 9. We don't ever know. Our unloading, when a train, it's different between a loading of a train and an unloading of a train. I have more flexible hours. And this is the reasoning why I do. Because when product is loaded, if it's loaded warm, let's say in Galveston, Texas, comes up to Watertown, South Dakota, the fertilizer goes through a cooling down process. In that process, it sets up. So that's why we get more time to unload our cars, is because of that. Because it can take us, we've had a train where it's taken us 4 days to unload because we can't get it out of the car. Our normal, if a train comes in decent shape, we usually start, if the train comes in during the night, we start at 7. We warm up the equipment by 7:15. We're operating. And what we try to do to be neighborly to everybody, we try to stop at 6 o'clock. We try to get to a 60 to 65 cars the first day. That leaves us 20 to 25 cars for the second day. Usually in another 4 to 5 hours, we're done. As long as the product comes out and the equipment on the rail car is good. And we bring in probably 7 to 10 trains a year. It varies from year to year. CHS has a joint venture down in Sioux City. We used to bring in unit trains of urea. Now the bulk of that is being trucked up here out of Port Neal, which is by Sioux City. So we've actually backed off the number of trains that we got coming in, unit trains coming in. Not single cars, but unit trains. Because what happens when you got to pay overtime? It costs you more money. So I try to limit the amount of overtime that I utilize because it costs me more dollars.
But what are going to be the hours that they're loading and unloading these wind turbines?
Andrew, are you on?
Yes, can you hear me?
Did you hear that question about what she's saying the hours of operations are going to be?
Yeah, typically our hours are going to run 7 to 5.
5 days a week?
Yes, ma'am. There might be some times where our customer will request weekend work, but that usually only happens if there's rain delays or so forth. But for this particular project where we're doing recycled, it should run typically on schedule and there shouldn't be any weekend work. We did get in a couple situations where we had to receive trucks over the weekend for receiving this first go round, but that was corrected and we pushed trucks back during the weekdays.
One thing, their cars will only come in on Monday. We get service out of Wilmer, Minnesota on single car units, not on unit trains. They come whenever they send them. On single cars, we get service to Watertown on Mondays. So they'll either bring them out late Monday afternoon or early Tuesday morning. That's when they set up and they give us our cars.
Sorry, then the train car will come in on Monday and they'll load them on Tuesday and they'll be gone on Tuesday, or do they just load up and sit there?
So what happens is the railroad brings them in Wednesday morning, they're gone, they went back to Wilmer. They will not come and pick them cars up until the following Monday when they bring the next set of cars.
Mr. Chair, this is Stacy. If I might, I would ask Andrew that was speaking on the phone to please state his last name and position within the company, just for the record.
Yes, my name is Andrew Miller. I'm the branch manager for Martin Venture, located in Leavenworth, Kansas.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you. It looks like we have another gentleman there to speak. If he could also state his name.
Is this on? Okay. My name is Lanny Kirsch. I am the general manager at AgWorks Co-op.
Thank you, Mr. Kirsch. Did you have anything to add to the record?
For our part of this conditional use permit, we are loading grain trains at this facility on the west side of this loop track. This is really no different than what has gone on in town at the junction of 212 and 20 for close to 50 years. When the railroad gives you cars, you load. They only give you so much time to load, and that's what we're doing. They're bringing trains in. They only give us so much time to load, and we loaded 15 trains in 2020. Of those 15 trains, 13 of them showed up at night.
Okay, you're talking about trains as in how many, like a unit? Is that how they measure trains? Is how many cars are in a unit or just 13 cars
No, there's 113 cars average
in a unit? Oh, okay.
in a unit train.
Thanks.
And your team is then operating on call to come in whenever the trains show up?
Yes, we are.
So the engine, the train's engines just sit there and wait like 24 hours or 48 hours or?
No, we have to have certified guys to actually get in the train and drive it for
Yeah,
us.
yeah, okay.
And this loading and unloading, is that specifically done at that western portion of the property?
Yes.
Chairman, this is Ford.
Yes, Ms. Ford.
When the 13 trains came in the night, did they idle somewhere? Was the unloading started at night? Could you describe that process a little bit?
Yeah, it doesn't matter what time they show up. We are usually there waiting for them to get out of the train so we can get in the train and start loading. The only time the train would sit and idle is after we're done. We do park the train. The engines are usually right by the facility when we are done.
So if they come, the 13 of the 15 trains that came in at night, as soon as they arrived, you started unloading them in the night?
Yes.
Okay.
Loading.
Yeah, we're loading only.
How long does it take
Loading,
to load
not
a
unloading.
train?
All right.
Takes us about 10 hours.
10 hours to load the whole train?
Yes.
Okay.
Do those trains depart immediately once the loading is complete?
Not necessarily, no.
What would
So
dictate the departure of the trains?
Pardon me?
What dictates the departure of the trains?
Railroad has to call on a train crew to come and get in the engines and take it away. So we have had crews waiting there at the facility for us to get done, and we've also had the train sit there for 2 to 3 days waiting for a train crew to come and take it.
So this is Ford. I have two other questions. So the first gentleman that spoke said he had about 10 trains a year, and now you're saying you have 15 trains a year. So is that a total of 25 trains a year, or are these duplicate trains?
No, they are, he's a loader and I'm an unloader.
So we're talking the same trains?
No, he loads his trains with grain.
Okay.
I unload my trains with fertilizer. My cars usually average 85 car units. We can bring in 110. We have done that. And that usually takes us just about 20 hours to unload a 110 car train.
So we're actually, between the two operations, talking about 25 trains a year.
Yes.
All right. And when the train is there waiting to leave and the crew has not showed up that's going to man the train and drive it, does the engine stay on, or do you turn it, or is it shut down?
No, we're not allowed to turn it off.
So it stays on however long it takes for them to
Yes.
come and get the train and dispatch it out.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
And then how many trains on top of the 25 trains for your two, how many trains are they expecting for the blades to also show up?
They won't be done in trains. They'll be done in single cars. Max, Andrew, was what, 20 cars maybe at a time?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So you're going to have for the wind blades 20 cars per time. And how many times are we talking a year?
That's going to vary on the customer supply of recycled blades to us. So for this time, we received 85 blades, and that's what's on the ground right now. And like Terry mentioned, we loaded our first rail car up since this is a test shipment. Outside of that, once we offload this rail car and we get the green light from the customer to finish our loading, we'd be looking at approximately 25 to 30 rail cars
Once a year?
total.
Once a year, or what do you estimate you think you're going to have a year?
I would say if everything goes as planned, we could have on a high end of 50 to 75 rail cars in 1 year. And that 20 car volume is always, I mean, it could vary. I mean, just depending on how much blades we receive. I mean, we could only load 4 rail cars out. We could load 10 rail cars out. It just depends on it.
So you're going to have 85 blades per car.
No, ma'am. There's going to be 4 blades per rail car. And there's 85 blades on the ground right now in Watertown at CHS.
So that's like right around 21 cars at one
Yes, ma'am.
train. Okay. So then if you're going to have 50, so you're only going to come in twice a year?
It could vary.
It's not going to be.
I mean, I can kind of shine light. I mean, this business opportunity is completely new. It's at its infancy in the wind energy market and recyclable market. Most of these blades have been buried underground in Wyoming, so the OEMs are trying to be proactive and find ways to recycle these blades. So when this opportunity came to our lap, I mean, it literally came to us and they were sending trucks to Terry's location ASAP. They're trying to use an alternative over truck to cut down on transportation costs. And then that's where we came in and proposed a rail solution for the customer. And these blades are going to Louisiana, Missouri, where they'll be pulverized and recycled into, added to concrete.
In your workflow with this, you've got 85 blades on the ground. You're going to cut these up. It's 4 per unit, so that's where you came up with that 21, 22 units to ship these out. But you're not necessarily going to do that all at one go. You're going to fill a car or two and then ship that out and fill another couple cars and ship it. Okay.
And that's kind of where this is a test for us, because the end receiver, they're going to have to learn how to handle this commodity. They're going to have to, we're going to have to figure out how much time it takes them to offload the rail car. And they only have a 4 rail car spot, so it's not like we can send them 20 rail cars at once and they'll be able to manage it. So, we're going to have to be able to balance it with what the offloading capabilities can handle.
And the other thing too,
go ahead.
These blades are already cut up when they come in. They are not being cut up in Watertown.
That's correct.
Understood. Thank you.
So are they setting on anything special or just on the ground why they're stored here? And then my next question is how long do you expect these blades to come in, be offloaded from the semis, be stored here before they're loaded onto the rail cars and shipped out?
We had a pad formed, Clausen Construction come in, and to a spec that they wanted, and that's what the ground is. What was the other part of the question?
How long do you think between the time that they're dropped off with the semis before they're loaded onto the train?
That we have no idea. But they are being charged a fee for sitting there. So they're going to, keep them there as minimum as time as they can, because they're being charged monthly for the use of the pad.
That's correct. We don't want them on the ground any longer than we have to because it costs us money. So we have an incentive to get those blades out of there. The only reason that these blades are on the ground for the time being that we've had them this long is because we have to test this rail car, since this is the first time this particular blade and load have moved across to anywhere in North America.
How long
So-
have these been sitting here?
What's that?
How long have these blades been on the ground?
We received them at, I want to say, the beginning of December. End of November, beginning of December, somewhere right around there.
All right, thank you guys. Any additional questions from the board? We are in the public hearing state, and I do want to give a chance for some additional people to speak while we're in the open. If there's any last minute questions, go ahead and speak up now. All right, thank you, gentlemen. Back to the public hearing then. As noted earlier, so we had that neighborhood meeting with city staff and the residential neighbors out there. It was mentioned that a spokesperson was going to be present. Do we have somebody on the line here or in the room to speak?
Yes, this is Evan Brandley. I'm a joining landowner.
Thank you, Mr. Brandley.
First of all, I got some handouts that I'm going to hand the board members that are here currently so they can follow along with where we're going to go and talk about. So,
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Mr. Case.
would you make sure that the applicants and the public also have access to those handouts?
Yeah, I was going to suggest, Brandy, if you could put it up on the overhead, please.
Yep.
And share it through the teams.
I don't know if they're gonna be able to see it.
hey, that should work.
Right.
What I've done before is like pull it up on my phone
Okay.
and just take it. Because that doesn't register.
Right. It doesn't, it's part of the computer.
All right, 1 second, everyone on Teams. I'm going to log in on my phone so that I can share this packet with you.
Or Brandy, do you have is it like a PDF or something?
No, but I could scan it and then
I just do whatever works best.
I'll try to make this work. Okay, why didn't I just heard him on my phone? He didn't. Okay, well, when you. Will somebody on Teams just speak, because I think it's coming through my phone now, and why would it do that?
What's that?
Like when Blake was talking, I only could hear him through my phone.
Oh, no, it should be. Oh, shoot. No, you know what? Because the audio isn't going through. Yeah.
Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so I'll be able to share this right here. That's fine.
Okay. Do you want me to go scan up here real quick?
Sure.
Oh, did
Oh,
she?
okay.
Okay.
Her hand might get tired holding it.
I know. Well, she'll get it. She'll scan it. Okay, if they would just let me put.
Appreciate everybody's patience here.
Okay. So, can you guys see that on Teams?
We can, yep.
Okay, so we'll do this momentarily, and then so Evan can begin, and then yeah, Stacy is getting that. She went to scan it, so then we'll get all that arranged. But during the
All
presentation.
right, sounds good.
All right. Thank you, Board of Adjustment board members, for allowing my neighbors and I a chance to be heard about the issues concerning the I-2 heavy industrial property adjacent to ours. I have a packet for all the board members that have been handed out, so you will be able to follow along and ask questions. My neighbors and I are having issues with the annexation of the adjacent property along with the request for conditional uses. I will discuss the issues within the packet and present to you what we feel would be a reasonable solution. The reason for the packet is I would like to begin where it all started for my neighbors and my family. So on that first page that you're currently looking at, parcels 1 and 2 were first purchased back in 2008 from Lake City Dairy to Watertown Co-op. And then parcel 3 was first purchased from Lake City Dairy to Watertown Co-op 19 October of 2011. The annexation into the city that was previously done of the northern half was 21 March of 2011. So that bottom part was never purchased at the same time, is the reason I have that in there. And our previous annexation meetings, they have said that it was all purchased at one time. That is partially correct. Watertown Crop Nutrients purchased the whole thing 17 February of 2012. So the second page that I have here is the actual annexation that the city did for parcels 1 and 2. It was annexed in, like I said, 21 March 2011. And in the paragraph where it says, be it further resolved, I believe that's where it's at. It says with no, or excuse me, the last paragraph where it says now therefore be resolved, the last sentence of that, it says no zoning designation at the time. So it got annexed in, but no zoning designation. So what was stated earlier was it got annexed in and zoned I-2 heavy industrial in 2011, which is not correct at the board meeting. Also,
can I jump in there
Mr.
just
Chair,
a moment?
Mr. Chair, I want to just, this is case. All properties are brought into the city with no zoning designation when they come in. And then they are subsequently rezoned within that same meeting or shortly thereafter. I think the ordinance requires everything to be brought in as an agricultural piece of ground initially.
Right, and that's what this is Brandy. I was going to state that as well, that is typical procedure, that the annexation resolution always states that, and I did talk with Evan about that earlier, and then how there's a subsequent ordinance that implements the zoning. So it is done hand in hand. But that resolution that he has here in this packet, that is why it states that there's no zoning. So.
Thank you, Mr. Case. Thanks, Brandy. Go on, Mr. Brantley.
So along with this packet, in the paragraph where it says, be it further resolved, they have 2 years of the effective date of this resolution to have it platted and filed with the Register of Deeds. It was platted and filed with the Register of Deeds 5 November of 2013. It was past the 2-year mark. And along with that, back in 2011, when the city annexed this in, when were the adjacent landowners notified, either certified mail or whatnot, to attend, to contest or whatnot, voice our opinions on this? If we go to the next page, the landowner had stated that they did send an email out, CHS, and that the landowners were invited to a meet and greet. How can we help you? We did have a sit down. Not all neighbors were there, but we did have a sit down with Chuck Sweetie back in 2011. And he stated at that time, cars would never sit long periods of time. Engines would not be heard. Too much cost when cars sit. And there'd be only 4 to 6 trains a year. And at that point in time, the next page, there is a map that they provided to us of the location of the proposed track and the building and the actual drive to the dry fertilizer plant at the time.
Mr. Chairman, pardon me, Mr. Bradley, I just wanted to let the record reflect that I believe Commissioner Culhane has now joined us.
Thank you, and welcome, Mr. Culhane.
Sorry for being late.
So the actual next page, after that meeting, I did have a couple conversations with our neighbors, concerns and stuff, because it seemed like not all our questions were answered with CHS, and it was the actual first time that we had heard about it. I would just like to point out in my first paragraph, I did not feel that all questions were answered. And this email was sent on September 30th, 2011. On the second paragraph, I'd like to just point out one part. It says Parcel 3 that dirt work is currently being done on as of September 29th, no. I also went to the City Hall in Watertown to see if there were any additional building permits or whatnot on Parcel 3 that dirt work is currently being done on. As of September 29th, there were none. Parcel 3 is not annexed into the city as of the rest of your property. It seems to me there's something not being disclosed to all the adjacent landowners that you say you're trying to be a good neighbor to. And then I asked him in this email, I believe that all parties involved, including the city, should get together and just try to figure this out and answer questions that were asked. So the next thing in the timeline is actual Watertown Crop Nutrients Development Agreement. It was signed 29 August, filed 5 November. And on page 3 of 6, Charlie, yep, right there. The first bullet there, it says all required improvements shall be installed to the satisfaction of the engineer within 5 years of the date of the instrument and with the Register of Deeds. Developer acknowledges and agrees that all terms and conditions contained herein shall remain a continuing obligation until satisfaction and completion. So if we actually go to page 4, third bullet, towards the bottom it says, it is understood by the developer that the city's primary consideration for granting approval of the subdivision plat on the hereon described property, immediately install aggregate base and grading concrete, curb and gutter, bituminous pavement, sidewalk, sanitary sewer, and services, water services. Now, in here, it also states that some of these, like sidewalks, walking paths and stuff, are not viable because of where it's located, but it does not say anything such as like hey, we're not going to do curb and gutter. So the actual next page is the actual plat, signed 12 September 2013, filed again on 5 November 2013, when it should have been filed on March of 2013. And to go along with previous meetings that we've had with CHS here at the City Council, they said that they do not own the railroad tracks and they have no control. But there is actually no right-of-way for either Great Northern's Railroad Company or BNSF. So they do actually own the whole track. They control it. Now, they may not control the time the train comes in, but they actually control the track itself. There's no right-of-way. So the I-2 or I-1 heavy industrial, bullet 5, to protect areas appropriate, or bullet 6, sorry, to protect residential and commercial properties from noise, dust, dirt, vibration, rail traffic, hazardous, incidental to certain industrial uses. So if we go to I-2 heavy industrial, bullet 5, it states the same thing. And that's why, pretty much why we're here. But to go along with that, on their site, so originally this was only one building for dry fertilizer chemical that originally came in 2013. Since then, they have liquid holding tanks on the CHS property. They have liquid bulk on Egg Works property, and they have unloading train cars into semi-tanks of the liquid chemical that they provide. So our question also with that is, with an I-2 heavy industrial, is there any requirements for business owners to file a spill prevention plan, evacuation plan with the city hall or city fire department, you know, that us adjoining landowners would be aware of or know what to do in case of something would happen? Not saying it will, but we can't predict that kind of stuff, but that's why we have those plans in place. So tonight, the I-2 CHS is requesting number 7, number 10, and number 19 on the I-2 heavy industrial. And they're asking for the conditional use. So in the conditional use, how does the city, when somebody files for a conditional use request, how does the city notify adjacent landowners? Yes.
And that is in the ordinance that you do have referenced in here.
Yep. So I just want to point this out, something to maybe fix. In the ordinance, it states first-class mail. On the application for conditional use, it states a certified mail. The application in their packet states certified mail, and the ordinance actually says first class. So
we recently amended that ordinance, and I'll have to check at what application. We do need to update some of the things on our website, but definitely the ordinance would be what would stand. Our applications, they should be consistent, yes. But if that has not been changed, thank you for bringing that to our attention, and we'll make sure to get that noted.
And in particular, if we're looking at older copies of applications that were in effect at the time, they'll certainly make reference to the older standard.
Right. Yep. Good point. Like.
I just wanted to point that out. I seen that when I was looking through.
No, it's a good catch, Mr. Brantley. Thank you.
So the actual next page, the train log. So the city, you board members actually asked us last time we were here to keep a train log since our last meeting on 7 January 21. So there actually, if you look at this list, there actually has been 7 trains since our last meeting. CHS said that there would not be any trains in the next couple weeks. There was actually one the very next day at 2 a.m. So
Okay,
what sorry.
You have from 2 to 11, you mean it came in at 2 and it left the
So
next evening at 11?
Correct.
Okay.
So what I've learned about the trains, just looking at stuff and trying to figure things out, what I've learned about the trains, they are correct. They have no control when the train comes in or when it leaves. They do ultimately have 24 hours to unload once they sign over the engine. If they get loaded in 10 hours or less, they get an incentive, a bonus. So when that train comes in at 2 a.m., they're going to start either unloading or loading that train so they get an incentive. How does that benefit us adjacent landowners? And the reason behind the actual rail spur and the size of the rail spur, it needs to be a 100-car minimum, or the rail BNSF would not provide cars for their operation. They did not want to split cars like it currently was in city limits, where it currently is on 212 and Highway 20. And just one thing to point out on this train log too, not since our last meeting, but previously in the past, some of the neighbors have actually called the sheriff to have that engine of the train moved to a different location because it's loud, it needed to be moved. So the next page, I have some pictures actually. So Board Member Oletsky, you asked us to contact or look into those houses along 4th Avenue along the river. So I do know a gentleman that does live there. He's in the military, retired, but I spoke with him and I actually took a picture. The first one on the left is the rail spur along 4th Avenue. It's empty because all the train cars are mainly out by us now. I mean, are there a few cars here and there? Yes. It's not always empty. But so the next picture to the right, there's a sign posted by the railroad. No trespassing, Minnesota law, because there's a right of way. The bottom left picture is the conditional use signs posted. There's actually 2 of them. And then the bottom right picture is actually a picture of 100+ cars on a rail loop. So when that 100+ car train comes in on that rail spur, it almost takes up that whole loop. There's probably less than a quarter of that loop that does not have a car sitting on it. That's the length of the train, just perspective. So the next page, the top left, is the Eggworks and CHS sign. Oh, you didn't get the next picture, or the next, but I can talk. It just shows that, all right, so the top left picture is Dry Chemicals by Eggworks and CHS. The bottom, or the top right picture, is a sign posted by CHS by 3 of the 4 entrances. It says no trespassing. Stay out. Bottom left is Crop Nutrients. They're liquid. So now we have dry, we have liquid. And then the Eggworks at bottom right, whereas the bean bins, and there's no sign, no trespassing sign on that entrance. So my purpose behind these pictures was, what is the property's future expansion plan? What additional stuff do they plan? How much more impact will they have to adjacent landowners as myself? So the next page. So we did meet the neighborhood meeting at City Hall with the Watertown Community Development Division with Brandy Hanton on 22nd January, sorry.
And Brent Mormon.
What's that?
Brent Mormon, the code enforcement officer, was also present.
Correct. So these are, and I didn't put them on here, you know, as priorities. I just listed them out. There's no priority on this. So number one, I mean, that we really talked about was loading, unloading hours. And one thing that we thought as adjacent landowners, 7 to 10, 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. Now, if a train comes in at 2 a.m. in the morning, let it sit there till 7 a.m. Don't start unloading or loading it until 7 a.m. Second one, increase the noise control buffer. Additional trees, either spruce or evergreen. It's something that's green and year-round. So they did state that we requested 3 rows of trees be planted earlier, back in 2011. We did request a buffer, but we didn't specify how many rows and what. But it's right now in the wintertime, there's no leaves, there's nothing. I mean, you can see right through it. Number 3, and as you look at this, board members, I do have some pictures on the very last page of some earth berm barriers that could be constructed. They are used in larger cities, along interstates, freeways, railways, and I just Googled a few to show you board members, you know, what is possible, what can be done. Another number 4, sound barriers constructed around the bean dryers. So when them bean dryers are running, it sounds like it's right outside your door. I mean, and we're on the east side and they're on the west side. I can't imagine the people right to the north of those bean dryers, and plans have it that they're going to put up more bins this summer if possible. So if there's any way to either do a earth berm or a concrete berm around those to either project the noise up or away or in a different direction. Number 5, placement of engines when not loading or unloading. So what we decided as adjacent landowners, what we've noticed is when it's on the very north end of the loop, it's not as easily heard, but that would be the more ideal location. And either that or off property to the north between CHS and the city bypass. There's a stretch of rail track there that they could, if they're waiting for the railroad to come retrieve the train, to unhook and actually move that, if they're not able to park on that north end. Number 6, tax deductions for adjacent landowners. So example, there's properties along Lake Compesca and the Watertown Airport. They actually get a tax deduction for the planes that fly over their houses. Even if somebody sells their house today and somebody buys it tomorrow, that new owner gets that tax deduction. So that's one of the 8 options we have. Number 7, since dirt work has been happening since 2013, and now the wind turbine blades have been hauled in from North Dakota, the amount of rodents my neighbors have been trying to put up with, either mice or raccoons, are they going to put traps out, or how are they going to remedy the additional rodent issue? And the last thing is the weed control, noxious weeds. And I say this, noxious weeds control throughout the CHS tree belt, the 3 rows that they did plant. And I kind of chuckle because that's one of their businesses that they're in, is to control weeds. So, and they're noxious weeds. So my neighbors and I discuss these with the city in hopes that we can resolve these with little or no legal actions. That is all, unless there are questions.
I just wanted to follow up on that tax deduction point, and I was able to talk to somebody at the Director of Equalization's office, and I know that Evan has too, and there is a process for that, and obviously it's nothing. The city itself can't really doesn't have any control on that, so that would be a matter to take up with the Director of Equalization, and then ultimately it would go to the Township Board for their consideration.
The way we look at it is if they're getting an incentive or bonus to unload that train in amount of time, they're benefiting, we aren't. How can we both benefit?
Okay.
I think the point that Brandy was making is that that entity would be the
Correct.
legal entity that could grant that, right?
Yeah.
The city doesn't have any authority to establish tax bases for properties outside of the city limits.
But you can help with the process.
I think that what you would have to do to start off with is that you and the adjacent landowners would have to meet with your township boards and bring it up with them. And then they can start the process as it starts going.
Okay.
Because you're not in the city.
Right.
Just the spur is. But now I have another question.
Okay.
Now, what you would like to see is a berm and some trees where they have like that cropland
Correct.
just to the west.
Yep. And then if possible around the bean bins, either earth or concrete.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, but what I see is on that one page, the back page, you know, where you're talking about the buffer and getting those trees and stuff.
Correct.
Do you think that that would probably help with some of the rodents too?
I believe it would help more with the sound.
Okay.
You know, the berm and the trees would help with more of the sound and the vibration. And, you know, rodents are going to go wherever, but.
But the type of tree are more of the evergreen type trees and stuff.
Something that would year round.
A little bit more fuller.
Correct.
How tall do you want that berm to be?
One example was that very last page, and
Yeah.
you know, I just copied that off. You know, engineers would have to figure out, you know, the height of the rail versus the sound and the bounce and the decibels and all that. And I'm not an engineer.
No. But you know, when you're looking at the picture, it looks like the berm is about as tall as the eaves of that house.
Correct.
So that would be what, 10 feet?
Or
Or
more.
12? Yeah, I
12
suppose
feet.
for a foundation and
I
stuff.
think on the very first, yes, the very first page, that example shows like a 12-foot berm.
Yeah, and then the second one down, it goes way over the top.
Correct.
To the staff, do we have any engineering standards in relation to earth berms and sound control management?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Heath Funai here, Director of Public Works. We do not have any sound-based design criteria for earthen berms or screening efforts along those lines.
Do you know of any other cities that have something like that?
Perhaps some of the larger cities across the country have actual design standards for something like that they deal with a lot more frequently. And you'll see sound deadening walls built along interstates in the Twin Cities, for example, and things of that nature. They may have some design criteria that they utilize. Some of the states' DOTs may also have some information like that as well.
It does seem like, you know, concrete barriers or walls and that sort of thing are more commonly used in areas of high noise next to, you know, residential versus earthen berms. We had some similar conversation in relation to those dryers with the grain elevator in town off of 212. And part of the challenge in that is that the height of the grain bin and the dryer becomes difficult to use something like an earth ground berm adjacent to the dryer to control noise. where it'd be more effective to have something, closer to the residential neighborhood. Similar to where you've got the trees, next to the properties today.
Now, concerning another one of your issues when you're talking about like safety issues, if there's a leak or something, does the city of Watertown have anything in place for like a leak or something?
Spill prevention plan or evacuation plan?
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Mr. Case.
I believe because of the quantities of the materials that the CRS has there, many of those things are probably required SARA reporting. Therefore, they are part of reporting requirements with the South Dakota Office of Emergency Management. The South Dakota Cottington County happens to have a hazardous materials plan, which does have a response plan for first responders to come to places like that in the event there was a spill. And the only reason I'm stating that is because I'm personally aware of who wrote it.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Chip.
Fire Marshal Chip Primus. Yeah, and our crews actually tour that site annually. They get inspections also, and they do have proper containment around their tanks, and they meet what's required by DNR. So
I believe Mr. Nelson had something to say to this point, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, Mr. Nelson?
So on the containment, we went over and beyond what we really needed to do. You see the big blue and the white tanks? There's bladders inside the steel tanks, plus we got the wood, plus we got the earth berm dike with the rubberizing stuff. The state said we wouldn't have had to went that far, but we did. The ones that are alongside the small building, the same thing. They're all certified by the state. And what we did over along the road of Ag Works, up, over, go up a little bit more. Okay, down, right there. Go down a little bit. Nope, the other way. Right, up, keep going. A little more, a little more, a little more. Right there. We actually put in the shut-offs so that if something would start to leak, we can shut them off so that the stuff would never reach Pelican Lake. We wouldn't have had to done that, but we did it. Because we have the same concern as everybody else does. We do not want to ruin the environment. And we do also have what they call emergency response plan, which has every one of their phone numbers in. We also have the MERT, which is another part of that. And we actually go out every other year and get their phone numbers. We got it in the book.
That's good to know.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Nelson.
Yeah, I guess for a synopsis of Mr. Brandley's question there, the city is involved to, I'd say, a small extent to what Fire Marshal Primus has chimed into. We otherwise rely on the state agencies that oversee these spill prevention measures and emergency response actions and plans that the state requires. We let them be the big brother agency, if you will, that oversees and administers those regulations. It sounds like Mr. Nelson has touched on how they do have those in place with the state appropriately so. But we do not house those documents at City Hall or in the city engineering office.
Are you aware of a public resource access point that individuals of the public can go out and get that information related to a business? Or would it have to be a direct request or freedom of information type request to those state entities?
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Mr. Case.
any entity that has to report their SARA requirements, those are all public documents made available through the South Dakota Department of Environment and Natural Resources or through the South Dakota Office of Emergency Management. There is no actual clearinghouse of the individual quantities and those types of things, but if you make the request, that information can be obtained.
Sure. Question for city staff related to another point that Mr. Brandley raised earlier on. And this question is around the time-bound requirements in documentation such as the platting or development agreements. How does the city approach those in relation to ones that run past the expected execution time? I guess that question's for Heath.
That's a good question, Mr. Chairman. I wouldn't want to speak to how the city's handled that in the past. I can speak to today's processes that we've been administering since the last 2.5 years anyway, where the time lapse, I guess, hasn't been a concern, and obviously to the fullest extent possible, we as staff try to prevent that from happening. There's due diligence on multiple parties when it comes to carrying out those development agreement terms, whether they be from the owner or the developer or their agent, such as their licensed engineer, communicating with staff as far as the completion of improvements or triggering the reinspection requirements or whatever it might be in those agreements. And from my observations, and as it's been cited here tonight, some of those checks and balances have happened and some have not. But I just couldn't speak specifically to what we've done in the past to remedy that or to deal with that.
Understood, and I appreciate you, speaking to the way that we're taking things forward as well, because it's important that, while we do recognize that we may have had, issues in the past, that's not always to say that they're going to continue into the future, right?
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
may I suggest that we return to proponent and opponent testimony, then bring the discussion back amongst the board?
Yeah, so Mr. Brandley, thank you for your time. I do have the public hearing open. If there's any additional comments to be made on top of what Mr. Brandley has stated, if you've got some new information or concerns, we'll go ahead and take those at this time.
I do not. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brandley. Was there anybody else in the room there to speak before we close the public hearing?
It does not appear so.
Anybody on the teams in the public? All right, I'll close the public hearing at this time.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Mr. Case.
I would like the applicant to come back before so we could ask some questions.
Is this Mr. Nelson?
Yeah, it doesn't matter. I mean, we'll start with him. I guess my basic question is, I understand the history of what's happened on the property, and I understand the neighbors' concerns. And I was curious, have you been made aware of these suggested recommendations from the neighborhood prior to this meeting, or was this the first time that you experienced this information?
This would be the first time that we've experienced it.
Do you have any general reactions to what you heard from the neighborhood?
This is my problem with it. Okay, so we planted rows on the west and on the north. Some of the landowners took their trees out I had one landowner that decided he was going to put in a 4th row, never even asked me, he just put it in. You know, I'm kind of easy to get along with. My door is open. But when people want me to do something that they're cutting their stuff out to benefit them and then put their stuff on my property, then I get very defensive and not very happy about it.
Thank you.
Can I respond to the premium?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Can I respond to the premium that was brought up? So we get these premiums to load these trains in under 10 hours. There is a substantial investment in the facility to be able to do that. And in turn, that is so we are competitive in the marketplace. These local area farmers, there's upwards of 2,000 area farmers and landowners that lean on us to keep them competitive also. So just the premium helps us stay competitive. It's not gravy.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Mr. Case?
Before I make a motion, I'd like to provide my perspective, but I want to make sure that my brethren have any opportunities to ask the applicants any more questions before I make a motion. Seeing that, I just want to provide my perspective. The way I see it is that we have property that's been annexed in stages, what have you, into the city. It's been zoned I-2. The city has issued permits to construct the rail spur and 2 of the existing uses. I think I want to comment that I don't think any of the existing staff was part of any one of those 2 things. I'm not sure any of you were working for the city at the time. And I also realized that there was no conditional use permit issued in the past. So I think at this point we are obligated to follow our ordinance. And our ordinance stipulates in a situation like this, we have to follow our CUP process, which is a notice, a hearing. And then we issue those permits that are allowed, potentially subject to additional conditions. And I want to be very emphatic on potentially. All of these uses that are currently on ground and on site and that have been previously permitted by city are allowed in the I-2 zone. We have also, within our land use plan, have identified this area to be long-range industrial, heavy industrial development for the city of Watertown. And obviously, you know, when the proposal was brought before the city 10 years or so ago, I think the city was clearly aware that there would be a rail spur, that when you make the investment of a rail spur, it's not going to be for 7 trains a year, and that in addition to the fertilizer plant, there probably was some expectations that there were going to be additional heavy industrial uses in this area to utilize the rail spur. There were some conditions that were applied at the time of the annexation. They seem to be complied with, that were suggested. You know, so what I'm really struggling with today is, you know, the need to attach additional conditions. You know, maybe to the wind blades, because that's something new. I think some of the things that have already been approved by the city does provide some limitations on how we proceed. I'm going to make a motion to approve. We'll start with just the first one, the CHS conditional use permit with no additional conditions at this time for the purposes of discussion, and not to have any additional conditions that were placed upon them at the initial annexation and subsequent building permits. There's my motion, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Kays, and we will take them each individually. So I appreciate that and your comments. You know, I'm generally in agreement with you, and it is a struggle based upon the, you know, the use that we've had on the property and the history of the property on when we would potentially attach additional conditions. And like you said, I think the one exception to this may be the new use that we're seeing with the blades, but the rest of the uses have in effect been, you know, part of the original plan for the property, as well as aligned with the long-term land use plan, comprehensive land use plan for the city of Watertown.
And so, this is Brandy. I just want to clarify with that too, Todd. So this is not just CHS, this is for the property as a whole. So it's all the Watertown Crop Nutrients is actually the property owner. So this, and now are you just making the motion to approve?
I'm making a motion to approve. Do you want it?
Separately.
You said that you're going to take these all individual uses individually. Is that what you're asking?
Yes.
But for the entire property, right? So
the entire property, that a conditional use permit can be placed for CHS to continue the operations in which it's been doing with no conditions issued to it beyond what was there at the initial annexation and subsequent building permits issued by the city. That's my motion.
But are we going to start with the train loading and unloading?
I am saying CHS and all the things that are associated with that, ancillary to CHS, is to be issued a conditional use permit consistent with the annexation and subsequent building permits that have already been issued by the city with no additional conditions.
And
so if they're using the train and they've got their fertilizer plant and they've got their fertilizer building and all the accessory things to that use, apply to the property in its entirety is what I'm making my motion to.
And I believe Commissioner Brandy had those spelled out to what staff thought would be appropriate conditional uses as listed in the zoning ordinance. Are you recommending a motion different from that? Rather than
Yes.
specifying them specifically as listed in the conditional uses in the zoning ordinance?
The condition. What I want to do is I want to make a motion that makes the two existing uses whole. If that's, by the way, that Brandy has put that together, that I would go along with it.
It seems as though it does, Mr. Kays, with the descriptions of the train loading and unloading operations, and the fertilizer manufacturing operation.
And the grain handling, right?
Yes.
Is there any way that we
but-
could put in there, like, when the engines are, when they're waiting?
Hold on. That's my motion. Let's get a second to the motion before we go on and add conditions.
Yep. So the motion on the table by Mr. Kays doesn't include any additional conditions. Do we have a second?
And now, just for clarity, so this is for, and it's not specifically for CHS or AgWorks. It is on the property. So it is this, Todd's motion is for the train loading and unloading and the fertilizer manufacturing conditional uses, and that he's making a motion to approve those with no conditions, and then we will still act on the salvage storage of wind turbine blades. So he has combined two of the three because they have existed previously.
Correct.
I'll make that second just to get the conversation going.
Thank you, Bonnie.
Then, Mr. Chair, as the maker of the motion, I would request that if we do attach conditions, that we vote on the conditions individually, so that when we handle the final motion as amended, it's going to be very specific, and it might not be just a kitchen sink full of conditions. I want those conditions voted on individually.
I think that's a fair approach, Mr. Kays. So it's open now for discussion from the board. If we need to make any additional motions for conditions, we will proceed with that now. Open it up to the board to discuss.
I would like to first address the placement of the engines when they're not in use during odd business hours, like in the middle of the night or something, that they be placed on the north side. Is that what you guys are talking about?
We place ours from the building, our fertilizer plant, they sit to the northwest. Yep.
What about Ag Works? Where does yours set?
When we park the train, it is parked right at the end of our bin site, right at the south end of our bin site normally, which is on the opposite side. But if we can park it to the north, we will.
Mr. Chairman, seeing as how you're not in the room, I just wanted to let you know that Mr. Brantley did indicate he'd like to speak again. If you feel appropriate, you could call for that at your discretion.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Mr. Case.
in order to do that, you would have to reopen the public hearing and allow the board to decide whether or not we want to continue it.
I think at this time, I'm not going to open the public hearing again.
An option would be, as you just did with the applicants, for further questioning, if the board did have any, just throwing that out there.
Does it require board motion?
The chair may instruct the ability to that, but if there's anybody on the board to challenge that, then it would go to the board vote to continue whether or not we want to open up the public hearing. It would take a 2/3 vote of the board members to override the chair.
I don't want to be here all night, but I'll make that motion.
I'll second Ford.
We'll take a roll call vote then.
Okay, Oletsky,
Yes.
Ford,
Yes.
Kays,
No.
Dolly,
No.
Spire,
No.
Culhane.
Yes.
Motion would fail, Mr. Chair.
Gives 2/3, okay.
All right, moving on. It still leaves a motion on the table by Mr. Case.
Would
This
this
is
be
Ford again, talking about Mr. Kays's motion. I'm looking at the I-2 Heavy Industrial District purpose. There are several purposes in point 5 of that, but the first purpose, and we were talking about adhering to our ordinances, and the first purpose of listed in number 5 of the ordinance is to protect residential and commercial properties. And I think we need to have some conditions, because it would appear that we aren't, with this motion without any conditions on it, protecting those residential properties. And the second thing I wanted to say is that perhaps some of you also listened to the city council meeting on Monday night when they annexed and zoned this property, and several council people were pretty concerned about the protecting the residents in that area. And I wrote down 3 comments that 3 different council people said. One said they hoped that the Board of Adjustment would give this deliberate thought. Another council person said, they hoped there was a reasonable solution for the homeowners. And a third council person made the statement that they hoped we would find some relief for the landowners in that area. They acknowledged that, it seemed to me they were acknowledging that it is a situation which there's not going to be any clear winners here, but hopeful that the board would take the landowners' concerns, as they said, and give those concerns some deliberate thought.
And I think those are valid concerns, Ms. Ford. Did you have the intention to make a motion to attach any conditions?
I would like to make a motion to attach some conditions, timing wise, about the loading and unloading of those trains that apparently, since we had our last meeting, how many, 7 or 8 trains have appeared in that short time period, and several of them were arriving in the middle of the night. I'm not a railroad person. I feel for the property owners, the business people, and the residents. There's been certainly some missteps and errors in the whole way this was handled throughout the years. I don't believe the property owners should have to listen to a train engine and unloading a train at 2 in the morning. So I would hope that we could talk about and come up with some time frame that might be appropriate, a little give and take on both sides.
Mr. Chair, this is Stacy. I just wanted to point something out for the board's consideration. One of the things we've thought a lot about this, and looking back, it's very difficult to know how this ordinance was interpreted back at the time with the information that the community leaders and the city officials had. So it could have been possible back then that some of these uses were interpreted as permitted uses rather than conditional uses. So I just wanted to point that out. We don't have any way of knowing back then exactly how they were classified. So I wanted to make the board aware of that.
This is Ford again. So do any board members have any ideas? Are you interested in fleshing out a proposal for some restricted time periods or not?
Make a motion, please, and we can vote on it.
I am asking for some input first, Todd, on what someone might consider to be an appropriate time frame that might satisfy the landowners and not be too restrictive for the business. I'm just asking for people if they have some information. Aren't we into a discussion period now on your motion, Todd?
My motion is to approve without conditions. And so that right now there are no conditions. So if someone wants to make a motion, I would be more than glad to discuss that motion.
Well, I guess I'm kind of confused about that parliamentary procedure. So I will make a motion that train unloading will not occur after 11 p.m. at night or before 6 a.m. in the morning.
We have a motion by Ms. Ford. Do we have a second?
I'll second that for discussion.
A discussion on this condition.
But now, Diana, what you're saying is that if the train comes in like at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, it just has to sit there until 6 o'clock in the morning? Is that what you're saying?
That's what I am saying, to give the property owners some middle of the night peace and quiet. Yes, that's what I am saying. I understand truly that we can't go back and try to sort this mess out. All we can do is move forward and try to give some relief to the property owners who, first of all, it's stated in several places that the I-2 industrial zone, the heavy industrial district, isn't typically adjacent to residential property. There's that. And there's the fact that that 0.5 of the I-2 purposes is to protect residential and commercial properties. That's what I'm trying to do, trying to figure out a way to help the residents without being totally, make it totally onerous for the property owners. for the business owners.
I'm not going to argue with on that, Diana. I think it's very important, but I think some of this discussion should have happened 10 years ago when the railroad was allowed to be constructed and when the building permits were issued to the uses that have been operating for years at this point in time. If you take a look at, yes, we are to protect residential uses, but generally our rules only apply to those uses within the boundaries of the city limits. And as the city grows, we are going to be encroaching other residential uses, other commercial, other agricultural uses that are going to be incompatible with the city's growth patterns. We as the community have made the determination 10 years ago or more that this is a place that we wanted to see a rail spur, because a rail spur was important to the city of Watertown at that time to promote this sort of economic development. And I'm not trying to be callous to the individuals that are living out there in the community, but the city had made a path 10 years ago, and the individuals that are before us today asking for permission for something that they believe they've already received, I find it hard to go back and say we're changing the game on them. If we want to have this discussion on the wind blades, I'll be with you 100% on that. But I think there's been some indication by the municipality that we are okay with this particular use being located at this particular location.
This is Ford again. I'll only say that all these years, they have truly been operating outside of conditional use approval. So while you make some good points, the bottom line is they did not have conditional uses. Now we can't go back and see who dropped the ball, but that is a fact. The rest of it is just supposition. It is a fact that they've been operating without conditional uses.
There is no supposition on what the city has done and the action that the city has taken. Those are all hard facts that have put us in the position that we are at today.
But they didn't issue a conditional use, Todd.
They issued building permits, and if I'm an individual that receives a building permit from an entity, I am going to believe that I am vested in getting that building permit and doing what I'm being able to do. At least that would be the argument that I would make in court.
But it was brought to the city's attention and back 10 years ago, and nobody acted on it then either, about that parcel 3 not being in the city limits.
I think it's unfortunate that because the city failed to act appropriately, that these residential landowners are the ones that bear the brunt of someone's oversight. It certainly doesn't appear to be them. If they hadn't come forward with questions about these blades right now, we still wouldn't be having this discussion, because we still wouldn't know all of this had happened. I'm just trying to say, I think those landowners need some sort of a break. It's not their fault.
I don't believe I said it was.
No, I didn't say you did, Todd. I'm simply saying I don't believe it was their fault. And we have here 2 businesses that are multi-million-dollar businesses who obviously, I would think, have attorneys at their disposal who should be able to read city ordinances and know what's happening. So there are a lot of people who dropped the ball. I just don't personally believe the landowners should take the full brunt of that. I would like to find a way to cut them a little bit of a deal. Hence my motion, to give them a good night's sleep when a train comes in the middle of the night.
I think at this time, Diana, thank you for that. We'll take a vote from the board on your motion for condition.
Okay. Dolly,
Yes.
Kays,
No.
Ford,
Yes.
Spire,
No.
Oletsky.
It's a tough one. Because I have other things that I want to do too. I wish we could all do them separate, together. There's another one that I would like to bring out too. Maybe this might help with the timing frame. Because I would like to bring one forward where they have to do a berm and trees where they have that cropland that goes right behind their homes. And I think that would help a lot with the noise in the middle of the night, because like one of the owners was saying, timing is of the...
Chair, point of order.
Yeah, okay, you're
Bonnie,
right.
Bonnie, after we vote on this condition, we'll certainly allow for subsequent motion to be made
Yeah,
if you
I
have
know.
additional conditions you want to propose.
And if you feel that your motion, like if you'll vote on this on just the time
Yeah.
constraint, and then
Point of order, it's a yes, no, or abstain vote, right, Chair?
Yeah.
Yes.
So,
Culhane.
No.
So motion fails.
all right, now, Bonnie, I think at this point in time, if you have
I can
an
do my
alternate
motion?
motion that you would like to make.
What was the vote total?
It was 3. It passed.
Yes, yes, a simple majority passes on the motion to amend.
Oh, sorry, you are correct. Yes, so that condition is attached, and now, Bonnie, if you would like to make an alternate motion, you can do so at this time.
Okay, I would like to make a motion to do a berm on the side, a berm and trees that they were talking about on the side, that the homeowner said that, there's some of their solutions. And I thought the berm, that earth berm with trees, would really take care of a lot of that problem. Because you can tell by when you go into big cities and you look at those berms, they have to do something. They have to really work for them homeowners. And I would like to see something like that. And it would look nice in the whole area if they have the great big evergreen type trees and stuff. I think it would help a lot.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Mr. Roby?
real quick, is there 7 people at the meeting or 6?
6.
6.
Then the condition did not pass. It was 3-3.
That's what I have written. Is that what you have written, Brandy?
Yeah.
Okay, so a 3-3 would fail then.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Roby.
Yes. Thank you for that, Matt and Stacy.
Just for
Bonnie?
clarity, Chair,
Yes, Mr.
for
Cohen.
clarity and convenience, and Bonnie, I appreciate your comments, and I don't necessarily disagree with them, but I think there was 8 different conditions. One of them was the tax deduction, which we can't impact at all.
Yeah.
But why don't we take the remaining 6 conditions, and then we make a motion on them, we second the motion, if there's somebody that's willing to second it, then we have the discussion, as opposed to having the discussion on the front end, just so we can kind of get through them, have reasonable discussion, and then either attach them or not attach them.
Okay, fine, I'm sorry about that. I would like to have sound barriers, earth berms and sound barriers constructed in the southeast corner behind the homes.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Yeah,
Are we talking barriers or berms? Because I'd like to separate the two. I mean,
I would like to
personally, I'm
see
much more,
berms. I'd
it's
like to
easier
see.
to put a fence up than it is to haul a bunch of dirt in. So are we talking berms or are we talking fences?
I don't know what would be the best. I would just like to see a berm or a fence and some trees. Trees really do a good job coming in with the noise. So whatever is deemed the best way from the city of Watertown. I don't know.
Mr. Chair, this is Bill.
Yes, Mr. Spire?
Yeah. So instead of specifying the solution in terms of the noise mitigation, and I would support a measure, a condition that would allow some mitigation, noise mitigation for the residential areas there. But we're getting beyond, at a board meeting here, we're looking into feasibility or getting beyond feasibility of what an appropriate solution is, whether or not a berm can even fit in the space between the rail and the existing road or tree line between the property and the industrial area there. So I guess I would say I'd recommend an amendment to that motion to have some kind of sound deadening or sound barrier that reduces it to a certain decibel level for the residents.
So
I
don't.
would go
Bonnie had a
along with
motion.
that.
The Bonnie had a motion on the table, and I think the appropriate would be to ask for a second to that motion. If that motion fails, then a substitute motion could be offered.
Okay, I understand.
Ford seconds.
I'm not sure I'm clear on exactly what the motion was from Bonnie.
Mine was a berm or earth barrier and trees
An earthen barrier and trees?
for noise.
Now, Bill, if you want to make a substitute motion that would supersede Bonnie's motion, we could take an action on, and if it's second, we can take an action on that motion.
Do we need to vote on the Bonnie's motion first and then
No,
I can hear it, or?
Not unless you don't disagree with Bonnie's motion and you want to make a substitute motion, you can do that.
Yeah, I'd like to make a substitute motion to provision for sound mitigation for the residential area to determine decibel level. The final ultimate solution would have to be subject to feasibility in terms of engineering solutions over.
Mr. Chair, there'll be a call for a second to that motion.
I'll
Do we have a
second
second?
that. Bonnie will second that.
With that second, I think we can take action on that proposed motion.
All right, sounds good. So this is for Spire's motion for sound mitigation. Dolly,
Yes.
Culhane,
Pass.
Oletsky,
Yes.
Kays,
No.
Spire,
Yes.
Ford.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-1.
You need to go back to Culhane.
No, I vote no.
Oh,
So 4-2,
okay.
motion passes. Mr. Cohen, you mentioned the list that we looked at previously. Was there additional ones from that list that we need to look at and address yet?
I think, especially when we talk about, and here's my problem with Mr. Spear's motion. I appreciate the thought but I don't know. It just seems awfully amorphous. And I think when we talk about conditions, we're talking about barriers like putting a fence up or planting trees. I'd be willing to entertain and or make the motion for, three or so rows of coniferous trees and or a sound barrier type fence in what would it be, the southeastern quadrant of property? Is that what we're looking?
Adjacent to the residential?
Adjacent to the residentials, but are we looking along the southern, the full southern border, or are we just the southeastern kind of L? From the start of those residential houses. I'm looking at the map here.
Can you guys see my GIS screen here?
Yes, it is coming up here.
I don't know why that wasn't polygon.
So
What you're talking about is a fence and trees together, working together, that type of deal, or one or the other?
I guess I could make the motion for both, or we could do it one at a time, and then see what the board's taste is. I'm inclined to trees or fence or both. And I would say no less than 3 rows of coniferous trees, coniferous being evergreen type trees, as opposed to deciduous, which would be leaf bearing trees.
To make things clear, I guess, and unambiguous, Mr. Culhane, to your point, perhaps if we just take those as individual motions.
I'd make a motion, Chair. I'd make a motion for the area highlighted on the GS, which would be in the southeastern quadrant of the property, bordering the residential properties, as well as the tree row to the south of the property, that there be a coniferous trees planted, no less than 3 rows of coniferous trees planted as a sound barrier. Trying to think about width, no more than 20 feet apart from each other.
Do you
have a second to the motion?
Do you want a minimum size, like, that have to be like 4 foot, like just the size all around?
No.
So if I may, this is Mr. Swider, just a quick question from Ms. Culhane. So there really literally is only like about 150 feet between the tree line, existing tree line there, and the rail. And to specify the solution amongst the board right now may or may not deliver the noise mitigation without some kind of study or analysis done. So I just would say determine what the decibel level is that's appropriate for a residential area, and then find the appropriate solution without imposing it at this the meeting here.
And I appreciate that, but I respectfully disagree, because I think we have to put specific conditions on this, but maybe I'm wrong. I mean, that's part of the challenge of being on this board when we talk about conditional use. Maybe we can simply put a decibel condition on it, which in that case, I'd be open to that,
My question is, who picks the decibels and who pays for the study and who makes that determination? I mean, you're starting to put onerous requests and requirements on something to 3 uses that have been in use for 10 years. I mean, I think at what cost do we as a community, and when I'm thinking community, I'm talking about the entire community, apply when we enforce additional conditions to uses that have already been blessed? Whether you agree on how they've been blessed or not, the question is, everything that you're asking these applicants to do should have been asked prior to the issuance of permits. And now you're talking about exactions, and there's enough attorneys in the room that know what we're talking about here. So I think if we want to go through this dance and start applying conditions to these proposed requests, I think before we act on those things formally, we had better give the applicant some time to respond to our intent to find out where we're going. That's just my opinion.
What do you mean, Todd? This is Ford, by give the applicant time to respond to our intent.
If we come out and we're going to have a motion to approve amended with 6 conditions on it, and these 6 conditions, I would say it would be prudent on the Board of Adjustments to postpone the decision on that until the applicant has the time to digest those conditions, because we're making them up on the fly as we go.
And I would concur with that.
The idea of doing a sound study, a sound barrier study, where the city has no noise standards throughout industrial and residential properties, we're basically legislating things without going through a formal legislative process. People complain all the time about judges being advocates and making laws up while they're doing, judicial actions. And I don't want to be in that position where we are creating potential legislation on an individual administrative act.
So what
But
you're
we do
sa-
have, but we do have screening requirements. We don't have noise decibel requirements. So if we went with the trees, as Mr. Culhane suggested, that would be something that's already discussed in our ordinances.
But the applicant had already planted trees 10 years ago. So why are we asking them to plant more trees today?
We
For
also do have
additional noise abatement.
we do have a noise ordinance, but the bad thing is that it is not applicable to I-2.
Ah.
But is it applicable to R1?
Well,
This property is owned R1. This property is out in the county.
County.
It's back to the point. This is
Okay,
county.
sorry. Yeah, you're right. You're right.
but they are developed as single-family homes,
Yeah.
as
So
the
I think we
R1
should
zone in the
give them
city
the
would be.
benefit of that.
And we do, just for reference, I mean, we do have similar issue with noise in existing within the city of Watertown and residential property that is near to I-2 property. The grain elevators, as I mentioned earlier, have residential surrounding them, and that can be an issue with sound, both from the trains coming through there as well as the elevators themselves.
Didn't we also at one time talk about noise issue with the racetrack and the houses across the street? Didn't we put something in like they have to be done by 11 p.m.?
There were some limitations there to the number of events that could be conducted annually as well, I believe.
And that might have been because I'm not sure what it's zoned.
The property had to be rezoned to accommodate what they were doing. And so it's an apples and oranges comparison to what you're having here.
I'm
You're
just
right,
throwing
it's-
out noise ordinances that I knew that we had.
Mr. Chair, this is Stacy. I just wanted to let the board know that we do have some screening, buffering requirements that are used within the ordinance, as well as a landscape ordinance for plantings.
Call the question on Mr. Culhane's
I don't know if I
motion.
ever got a second.
Sorry.
No, you didn't.
So the motion
I'll
by Mr.
second.
Culhane was to
Add
where it's called out on the GIS, right, to plant 3 rows of coniferous trees,
Yep, no
Correct.
less than 20 feet apart.
no less than 20 feet apart. And we have a second by Ms. Ford.
Correct.
No, do it.
Okay.
No more than 20 feet apart, right? I think. This is part of the problem when I don't know the tree stuff. Whatever the buffering standards
That-
are in the city ordinance.
Yeah, and that's appropriate. 20 feet is typical for coniferous trees.
But we have to remember it'll take about 10 years before those trees really do go into effect.
Yeah.
So we'll take a vote on this. We have a motion in a second.
Okay. Spire,
No.
Oletsky,
Yes.
Culhane,
Yes.
Ford,
Yes.
Dolly,
No.
Case.
No.
All right, 1, 2, 3.
So
It does
3 to
not-
3.
No, yep.
So that condition will fail.
So, Mr. Case, are you talking about even like the wind blades and stuff like that? That's all okey doke too?
No.
I'm saying the original motion is for those existing uses, the rail and the 2 existing uses. My original motion is to not attach conditions to any of those three. And then we've had one amendment to that motion.
And any of those two, correct? We have not acted on the salvage storage.
No, the wind blades are not part of my motion.
So there's 3 total conditional uses, and we are acting on the 2, the train loading and the fertilizer manufacturing.
Yes.
I just want to be real deliberate with our actions here. Again, tax deductions, we don't have any control over. 7 and 8 were rodent control measures and weed control. I believe that once this is brought into the city's responsible. I mean, we have ordinances that cover that, right? We don't need to do additional conditional uses.
Correct.
Just so those concerns are addressed.
Correct.
Okay, so that becomes an enforcement issue as opposed to conditional use issue, which leaves sound barriers for beam dryers and then placement of the engines.
Did you have a motion to make, Mr. Cohen?
No, I'm going to defer to any of my fellow board members if they want to make a motion, just noting what was left.
And so, never mind.
Any additional motions by the board?
Mr. Chair, no additional motion, but just like to enter something for the record.
Yes.
So I do believe the residents, looking at the ordinance here, do have a recourse with regard to noise levels, because it does specify in the city ordinance for I-2 the maximum decibel level of 65. So I guess the impetus is upon the residents to demonstrate whether that is being exceeded or not.
Again, I'm gonna come back and just say, and I'm not trying to pick on them, but they're not residents of the city of Watertown. There go the application and the rules of the city of Watertown do not apply to those residents.
They apply to the I-2 heavy industrial district, which is what the ordinance is specifying. It specifies that the maximum for an I-2 is 65. So.
If it is it 60, does it say 65 measured to the residents? Is that what the rule is?
To the property line of the tract with which the operation is located. So it goes up to the edge of the I-2 boundary, property boundary.
Which ordinance are you referring to, Spire?
21.64001.
Yeah, so, and that's here.
Revised ordinance of South Dakota, City of Watertown, South Dakota.
Yeah, so 216401. And that is where it does state on top about the performance standards. That's what I referred to previously, that the performance standards apply to all districts except I-2 heavy industrial.
So it isn't necessarily nebulous or amorphous. It is pretty specific and something that can be measured. So there is recourse, even though they're outside of the city limits.
But the rule doesn't apply. It says except.
It does apply to I-2 though.
It says except I-2.
All districts except I-2 heavy industrial districts.
Okay, my bad.
Sorry, I wasn't trying to be hard.
No, it's a good catch. You're right. Good catch. So disregard.
Do we have any additional motions, conditions from the board?
What's left on this is Ford, what's left on the list?
You guys are the earth berm barriers and the placement of engine when not loading or unloading. So number 3 and 5.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Mr. Case?
I would make a motion for number 5. Both applicants have stated that they would place their trains to the northwest corner of the property. They said that would not be objectionable to them. So I would make a motion that they would be required to place the train engines on the north end of the rail loop.
A motion by Mr. Kays, is there a second?
Ford seconds.
We'll go ahead and take a vote on this one.
Sounds good. And that is just when it is idling and they are not utilizing it because
Correct.
yeah, okay. Culhane,
Yes.
Ford,
Yes.
Spire,
Yes.
Aletsky,
Yes.
Kays,
Yes.
Dolly.
Yes. That motion passes.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Mr. Case.
point of clarification on the motion, the initial motion that was approved on a 4-2 vote, requiring some sort of noise study and subsequent actions to come of that. What does that mean? Or if somebody could repeat the actual motion that was approved, I'd like to have
Randy,
a
how do
discussion
you-
of what that means.
Randy, how do you have that captured?
So, and obviously I will be capturing this in the minutes from the video, but for what I have jotted down is that it would be sound mitigation to look, okay, that there would be sound mitigation provided whatever the feasible solution is for the appropriate decimal or decibel. Created from the train, from the sounds of the train.
Mr. Chair, that is a very nebulous motion. Being that I voted against it, I can't ask for a motion to reconsider, but I would ask those that voted in favor of it, if they would make a motion to reconsider so that we could have a discussion on that again. It would take one of you, it would take two of you that vote, one of you that voted yes to make that motion.
I'll make that motion to get the discussion going.
We have a motion for reconsideration by Bonnie. Do we have a second?
I'm going to defer to Matt on whether or not that somebody that voted in the opposition can make a second to the motion. I just lost my train of thought on parliamentary procedure.
I just looked this up the other day. The answer is yes.
I will vote. I'll second that for discussionary purposes.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Case. Thank you, Mr. Roby.
I understand the idea of trying to come up with some sort of mitigation efforts to protect the residents. The problem I had and why I voted no against that motion is, one, the noise decibels don't apply, decibel readings doesn't apply in the I2 zone, as just recently was pointed out. And two, I don't know what it is that you're asking this applicant to do. And because of that, if we can't be any more direct and succinct of what we're expecting out of the applicant, I don't know how we can apply a condition. That's nebulous. Thank you. To me, it was just a feel-good motion. No disrespect to those, the maker of it.
Mr. Spear, did you have any additional comments to make in regards to your original motion?
You know, I can respect the opinions regarding the motion and the burden it's going to place on the business owner. And fair point that the properties affected are outside of the city ordinance, control. I think it's reasonable expectation to grant them, some kind of mitigation. And I would point to that ordinance as a benchmark. And my only concern would be that specifying a berm may be infeasible. Having, dealt with earthworks throughout my career, it just may not be enough space for to reach the height needed to deliver the effect that was desired. So it was more in response to that, trying to specify to the business owner how they will in place mitigations. Concrete wall at a set height may be a much more feasible and acceptable solution to give mitigation to the landowners. But if the the board wants to take the position that they don't have any recourse because they're outside of the city and the ordinance doesn't apply, then I think it's a moot point.
I guess the other aspect that Todd alluded to here is the use of the decibel figure in the first place, and how you can determine what that standard is going to be, right? So if we just say that it's going to reduce it to an acceptable level, what is that acceptable level? You know, are we talking about, are we going to reduce it by a set amount, you know, by 20 decibels at the property line, something more specific and concrete?
I would say the reasonable expectation, and this is just, you know, we can go with the established ordinance maximum of 65. That would be what they would experience in the residential area. Or if the board so chooses, they could choose another reasonable decibel level, say 76, you know, a normal driving decibel in a vehicle or something like that. But now we're getting beyond, you know, the scope of some of the ordinance. And again, we're getting into more of an engineering and a science study area. I was just concerned about specifying X number of trees or X number of earthwork. May put a burden on the business owner that's not feasible.
Chair.
Yes, sir.
Colleen here. Again, I would be willing to entertain and vote in favor of something, quote, mitigation measures, but only in the terms of screening and buffering type stuff that's within the ordinance. And I think specifically coniferous trees. I don't know about a concrete barrier, but I think for the reasons we've discussed, the feasibility issues with a berm, you know, trees, relatively inexpensive, relatively easy to plant. I understand that not free, but relatively easy, quick to do. I understand that there's, you know, they take a time to grow, but again, that was why I made that initial motion. Outside of that, I don't really feel comfortable putting any other additional conditions, even related to sound. So I'd be willing to do a fence, a barrier, and or trees, and with a preference, strong preference for coniferous trees.
And I'd be willing to second that.
Okay.
Point of parliamentary procedure. There is a motion and a second to reconsider the previously approved motion. Unless you are making a substitute motion to supersede my motion, I would like to have action on that motion to reconsider.
As point of clarity, action to reconsider would be an additional roll call vote on this.
Yes. Yep.
Yes.
Are you ready
and
for
all
that?
Does, go ahead.
So yeah, that will exclude the sound mitigation motion that was previously approved, 3-3.
A vote.
Technically, the vote is to have a motion to reconsider, then a substitute motion can be made to take care of that.
Okay.
Correct, Matt?
The motion, yes, so first needs to be voted on whether or not to reconsider the action.
So a vote yes is in favor of reconsidering the action, and then we'll have to take a secondary vote to reaction that item.
Correct.
So we'll go ahead and proceed with a roll call vote on the reconsideration. Now we have a motion and a second on the table.
Yes. Spire.
Yes.
Oletsky.
Yes.
Ford.
Yes.
Kays.
Yes.
Culhane.
Yep.
Dolly.
Yes.
That motion passes.
So where we're at now is with the motion to reconsider has been passed, and so now there would be a vote on the original motion.
Do we take additional discussion on that?
That's
or do
your
we
draw.
jump directly into the roll call?
That's your call.
Just one clarification before, if we do go directly roll call, is a no vote's no on the condition, right?
No, a no vote would sustain the condition. A yes vote would. Oh, I'm sorry. You're right. I'm sorry.
So if no's win, the condition goes away, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Thank you. I apologize. I'm just trying to catch up with my Roberts here.
So we're basically back to where we were when the motion was originally made. Yes votes carry the day. No votes will make that condition go away.
Could you please
Everybody
read
clear?
could you please read the motion?
Oh, I wish I had it verbatim. So this is about the sound mitigation motion that Spire had made previously.
Yes.
And the fact that it would be, that it's up to a decibel and whatever the feasible solution would be after that was determined.
Mr. Spire, do you remember what your motion were? Could you clarify it a little bit?
Absolutely, yeah. Good report.
Thanks.
So the motion is that a noise mitigation be in place based on the feasibility of a study to reduce the decibel levels to the residential area to a specified level. And I would amend that to say, let's take our cue from the established ordinances that, that specified level would be 65 decibels. So it wouldn't be to predetermine what the noise mitigation solution was. That would just have to be determined based on the feasibility study based on the terrain there.
And you mentioned about amending it. You have to go with what the original motion was, and I think that first
right.
part.
I know. I know. I didn't include the specificity of decibels. You're correct.
Right.
So I'm not amending that. I'm just saying that wasn't implied, and that was something that had it done a little more thorough, stating the motion.
Okay. So, that first part, from what I've been jotting down, that was seemed. Did you have that written down?
No, I did not have it written down.
Okay. Yeah, and I apologize. I'm trying to jot it down as these are going on. But yeah, the beginning part of that before you talked about amending is what I believe that the motion was.
And it was not specific to any levels, as mentioned.
No, it was not.
No.
Yeah. So as we clarified, we're going to take a vote on this. If we vote yes, that will keep this motion or this condition attached to the original motion. A vote no would remove it in this reconsideration. Is that correct, Mr. Roby?
That's correct.
All right, we'll go ahead and proceed with a roll call vote. Brandy?
Kays.
No.
Ford.
Yes.
Spire.
Yes.
Dolly.
No.
Culhane.
No.
Oletsky.
Yes.
So it remains.
Yes.
No, I think, wasn't it 3-3 again?
Yeah, 3-3.
It's 3-3 on the reconsideration.
Yeah,
So it failed.
I believe so.
Is your count 3-3, Brandy?
Yes.
Yeah, mine's
Okay,
3-3.
that would fail then.
It would fail. So that consideration essentially, at this point, is off the table. Is that correct, Mr. Roby?
Oh, is that a question? Yes, that
Yes.
is correct. Yes.
Just looking for confirmation.
So basically what we have right now currently is a motion to approve with two amendments. Amendment to require trains to be in the north corner of the loop and have some sort of study. And
No, that failed. That is gone now.
So just one. We have.
oh yeah, you're right. Oh, so it's just the one amendment. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm getting lost too.
So the only condition you guys
The
have
only-
currently now is to place the train on the north end of the railroad.
Yep, which is number 5 on this list in front of us.
Yep.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Mr. Case.
I'm not sure how to go about making this motion, but I would like the applicant to maybe suggest something that they would do on their behalf to mitigate, which doesn't have a long, it doesn't impact their ability to use their land, and maybe put them in the driver's seat and see what they have to offer. And if it meant a motion to postpone action on that, to give them an opportunity to do that and then come back, maybe that would help us in our decision making. I don't know where you guys are at that. I mean, if you guys are okay with that, if you want to keep plodding along, let's keep plodding along. But I think, again, we're talking about adding conditions that most of us know nothing about, and we're making conditions absent any conversation to the applicant, knowing that he was going to be responsible to do this, which he was never told 10 years ago. Maybe out of the benevolence of the applicant, they maybe would offer something that would help appease individuals on both sides. Just throwing it out there. Maybe you could ask the applicant right now if they want that time.
I think that's a fair point, Mr. Kays. The applicant in the room there, could you approach the?
Mr. Chair, I think that they're going to take a minute to discuss it.
Because if the applicant doesn't want to say we're doing what we're doing, we've got our permits, we're moving forward with what we're supposed to be doing, and we don't want to offer anything, then we know where the lines are drawn.
And I appreciate the intention of Mr. Spears' proposal with the sound mitigation and not necessarily specifying exactly what the solution is. I can understand that, and I think your point, Mr. Kays, in regards to taking some time and potentially deferring this until that solution can be evaluated and something proposed, you may have some relevant bearing here.
Mr. Chair, just to let you know, a group of the applicants have requested a few moments out of the room to discuss this, and we'll be back momentarily.
Thank you, Stacy.
Mr.
You're
Chair,
welcome.
can we have just a 2-minute recess?
Yeah, let's do that. We'll go ahead and take a 2-minute recess.
Was any of the video ever shared with how loaded everything was?
No, I don't, because I don't have like a computer. I don't share the information, like, definitely during the public hearing.
So are they trying to get past the, like, I haven't heard nothing about the time. Is it still gonna be okay for them to run the train?
24 hours a day.
Yeah, like 24 hours.
So to be honest with you, he never closed the public time. So they came up and talked, and they never closed it. And then he started a discussion, made a motion, never closed it. So I never had a chance to come back up.
I think that when you can listen back to the meeting too, but I think that he did close the public hearing, but then they called the applicants up for further questioning.
They didn't let you, they didn't let you. But when they remark all property, adjacent property owners, the adjacent property owners don't get to review what they just said. It's not.
Well, and that's even why they did, they all like voted on that too, about giving the opportunity to decide against it, I guess. I don't think so, did they? It's on one person.
So, yeah, they did. So there's 10 members on board. How convenient there's 3 and 3.
Yeah.
2 people can't vote.
Well, there's only 7 acting members, and then we have 9 people total, so there's 2 alternates. But yeah, and it was not, I mean.
Because I guarantee some of this stuff.
And that is always the thing, like with the board members, is then you get
Well, even the
more
last,
voting
even the
members.
even the last vote, usually, okay, 3-3, it goes against, or not in favor of. This was just the opposite, that's why they always had to clarify the vote. So this was actually opposite of what it is, so it should have stayed. Not,
Yeah. And, yeah, so we are just in a brief recess, so, we'll let Dolly pull that, whenever he wants to begin the meeting again, but we do have some people out still, so if we give another minute. I can let you know when we're situated in here.
Yeah, if you could, thank you.
Yep.
Are the applicants back in the room yet?
They are, yep.
Okay. Brandy, I hate to say this, but I'm going to be stepping out here in about 15 minutes.
Is the rest of the board present in the room?
Yes. Yeah.
I think we can continue to proceed then.
Yep. Okay, so,
So the question to the applicant is, you know, in spite of the difficulty we're having here approaching this particular issue and the potential solutions on the table, is this something that you would be, if you would like some time where we could defer this to a future date to have some time to review potential options here?
So what we're looking at is we will plant 3 rows of trees. We will do it on the north-south, going this way. We will not plant them this way because that's low ground. They probably will not survive because that's always flooded. Correct?
There's already trees there too.
What's that?
There's already trees there.
Yeah, there's already existing like a 5 or 6 row shelter belt.
So it would be an additional 3 rows of trees?
Yes,
Okay, and they would be the coniferous type?
yep.
Okay, that's nice.
Could we have that pointed out on the map, please?
Yep. So,
Thank you.
It'd be just the red.
Yep, so I do have it up there as the red line, and we'll actually extend it down. So, in that area, 3 additional rows of coniferous trees spaced 20 feet apart.
You said that in the north, right?
Yep, north, south, along, so it'll be the running north and south on Watertown Crop Nutrients property, adjacent to the residential properties to the east.
Mr. Chair, I'd make that motion.
Thank you, Mr. Case.
And
So we have a motion to that effect. Is that a second by Mr. Spire?
It is.
We'll proceed with a roll call vote.
Okay. Ford,
Yes.
Spire,
Yes.
Aletsky,
Yes.
Culhane,
Yes.
Dolly,
Yes.
Kays.
yes.
That motion passes unanimously.
Mr. Chair, call the question as motion as amended.
Second, Colhane.
Should we take a vote on the call to question?
Yes. 2/3 required.
Okay. Are you ready for that roll call?
Yes.
Kays,
Yes.
Dolly,
Yes.
Ford,
Yes.
Spire,
Yes.
Oletsky,
Yes.
and Colhane.
Yes.
Okay, we'll proceed with the question at hand. And this is with the two conditions as amended. We have condition 5 from the sheet, parking of the train on the north side of the property when not in use, and then the addition of the trees that we just discussed.
Yep.
I think this is with you, Brandy, for a roll call.
You don't need a motion and a second on that?
I already made the motion. I'll call the question
Okay,
on the motion. The motion is amended. We did that.
Yep.
okay. Sounds good. Sorry for that delay. Spire,
Yes.
Oletsky,
Yes.
Colhane,
Yep.
Kays,
Yes.
Ford,
Yes.
Dolly.
Yes. That motion carries.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Mr. Case.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the third part of this request regarding the wind blades.
With no conditions?
I'm just making the motion to approve and see what happens after that.
Okay, we've got a motion on the table by Mr. Case.
This is, Mr. Spire, I'll second that.
And second by Mr. Spire.
Can we make a condition that the blades are only stored for, on that concrete pad? Is the concrete pad already poured yet?
Mm-hmm.
No?
Yes, it is.
Oh, it is?
It's gravel, is it not?
No, it's gravel. Or,
Oh, my mistake.
Yes.
I thought it,
No,
but it's approved for something like that. The city is happy with the way that the gravel is for storage, something like that?
You
Yeah.
guys are only doing gravel, you don't plan on doing concrete?
mm-mm,
Okay.
no,
I thought that was a part of your grading permit.
no,
Okay.
no, it was just gravel on the grading permit.
Okay. So it is just gravel in this location here. And I have that highlighted on that map in the agenda as well.
So Bonnie, is your motion to limit the storage of these to the outlined area on the site map?
Oh, sorry. Yes, that's what I'm talking about.
The identified wind turbine blade storage pad from the reference shown on the screen.
Now, with this gravel and stuff, is there like an underlying clay or anything underneath there to hold if there's any sort of like water runoff or anything like that?
Yeah,
Okay.
so what they did is they took the black dirt off, brought clay in, and then put our sand that was on the property over the top.
And
Bonnie,
then-
I'll second your motion.
A motion and a second for an amendment. Do we have any additional discussion on this before we take a vote?
This is Ford. I'm curious. I've never asked. What are these blades made out of?
Isn't fiberglass?
Yes.
Fiberglass.
Fiberglass, ash. Andrew, are you still on the phone?
Yeah, they're balsa wood and fiberglass.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any additional questions or comments from the board? Okay, we'll take a vote on this amendment.
Okay. Dolly,
Yes?
Colhane,
Yep.
Oletsky,
Yes.
Spire,
Yes.
Ford,
Yes.
Kays.
Yes.
All right,
Motion passes.
That amendment passes for the storage location of the blades. Any additional motions by the board? Hearing none, we'll proceed with the roll call vote on the amended motion.
Sounds good. Kays,
Yes.
Dolly,
Yes?
Ford,
Yes.
Spire,
Yes.
Oletsky,
Yes.
Cohane.
Yes.
That motion passes.
All right. And I
I believe
believe.
that takes us through that agenda item, correct, Brandy?
Yep. Yep.
I appreciate everybody's patience with the parliamentary procedure. I know that was not an easy thing to work through. Moving on to item 6 is open public comments. Was there anybody that signed up for open public comments in the room there to speak on something that's not on the agenda?
No,
Okay. Any new business?
none that I have.
Any old business?
No.
Ford has a question of old business, I'm sorry.
Sure.
Since we're trying to tie up all these loose ends on this property, I had a question about those grain drying bins. Was there a building permit required for those? Was there one issued? Are they a permitted or a conditional use? We've talked about them and alluded to them several times, but I've never gotten those specifics. And there was some mention about adding more grain drying bins, perhaps, so maybe we should know what is required about those grain drying bins.
Staff, wouldn't the grain dryer bin be an accessory use to the grain bin itself?
1 second here. We're looking into it.
Mr. Chair, this is Stacy, and I do believe that they would likely be a permitted use. We can take a little bit harder look at that, but we have something called a freight warehouse and then warehousing. So that's just, storage of materials.
The other item number 1 under permitted uses is agricultural. I
Yeah.
would deem grain bin storage and drying of grain being agricultural related.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would deem that, based on all of those components, I would deem that to be a permitted use within the district.
So we won't be surprised by those sometime in the future.
No, it won't come. They will not have to come to the board.
We
Thank
would
you.
review that at the time of building permit, though, and look at their specific application and make a determination once we have an application in hand. So that was just generally.
Yeah.
And they would be subject to other conditions upon the I-2 district, such as setbacks and other limitations.
Correct.
Any additional old business?
None that I have.
We'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved, Cohane.
Have a second?
I'll second that.
And a vote on adjournment?
You need a roll call vote.
No.
I think the chair can just
Adjourn.
Adjourn.
Yeah. And that's what
Okay.
you wanted to do there, Blake?
Yep, we're adjourned.
Okay. Thank you.
Brandy, I have to step